Welcome to WebEx. Please press 1 to be connected to your... You will now be placed into the conference.
Say that later. You have to do this for a few hours.
Do we know if the mic on? You can hear me, that's good, okay. For those of you who are in the room, I need to let you know right now, we've got new microphones again. The good news is while you're speaking, you don't have to hold the button down. If you're sitting at the table, if you push the button, it'll be green when it's live and red around the bottom there when it's not. We have a little podium off to the side here. That's for public comments, and that microphone is always live. So whatever it was we were all just talking about, if it picked it up, it picked us up. All right, so I just want you guys to keep that in mind. And if those of us who are in the room are ready to get started, why don't we get started? Do we know if the web is live and all of that? Yes. It is? Okay, yeah. Great, thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Julie LaRocque with the South Florida Water Management District, and we're kicking off our latest Technical Oversight Committee meeting, which is kind of like a quarterly meeting, although our schedule's been a little bit off. So just wanted to welcome you to the meeting. If we could start out by, for those of you who are on the phone, and otherwise we have a few of the reps here, myself.
Dan Crawford, TOC rep for the Corps of Engineers.
Lori Miller, representative for National Wildlife Service, Waxahachie.
Donato Sarai, Everglades National Park.
Thank you, guys and gals. How about on the phone? Do we have Frank Powell on the phone?
Good morning, Julie. I'm here.
Great, thank
Frank
you.
Powell.
And
Yes,
Mr. Barquette?
This is John Barquette. I'm on.
All right, great. Thank you all so very much. Why don't we go through and identify other folks who may be on the phone, because obviously we can't see you. First of all, let's see, we got that. How about agency technical staff or representatives from DEP?
This is Kenny Heyman with DEP's Office of General Counsel.
Yeah,
Paul,
and
you want
this
to
is Charles.
And try to figure out a way not to all talk at one time. I know you can see each other, right? I'm
Fine,
just kidding,
Jack.
sorry. Did I hear Kenny or? Who did
Yes, that was Kenny.
Okay, thanks. Who else?
Alyssa Gilhooly.
This is Charles DeMonico, counsel for DEP.
Okay, anybody else from DEP?
Paul Julian?
Hi, Paul.
And Ed Smith.
Great. Okay, anybody else from DEP? It's not going, but well, okay. Next, how about DOI and Fish and Wildlife? We have folks on the phone representing them. Okay, Corps of Engineers. Okay, we're gonna have a quiet meeting.
This is Rachel Gray in the Office of Counsel at the Corps.
All right, thank you.
This is Phil Steffen, Council Corps Headquarters.
Brooks Moore in Jacksonville.
Hi, Brooks. Anybody else from the Corps? Okay, how about US EPA? Do we have anybody on the phone from US EPA?
Yeah, good morning, Dan Scheit. Hey, Julie.
Hi, Dan. And then do we have folks from other agencies that are on the phone that want to let us know they're here? Not hearing anybody. What about anybody else who doesn't represent one of those agencies who just wants to let us know you're listening?
This is Tony Federico.
Hi, Tony.
This is Amy Castaneda with the Miccosukee Tribe. Good morning.
I'm sorry, would you mind repeating that, please?
Yes, Amy Castaneda with the Miccosukee Tribe.
Oh, great. Thanks, Amy.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, this is Ernie Barnett. I'm listening in. Thanks.
Hi, Ernie. Thanks for calling
Hey.
in. We got anybody else? I think we probably have everybody, we think. Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Taking a look at the agenda, we've got a few preliminary things we need to do, but I do want to remind everybody, if you're on the phone, please mute your phone when you're not speaking, and also reduce the volume on your computer to 0 so you can avoid feedback. It's best if you can listen from either your computer or the phone, but not both. That kind of helps us with extraneous noise and those sorts of things. We will take public comment at the end of the meeting in case you have any of that, and generally we won't respond to your comments directly during the meeting, but we'll certainly try to get responses to questions to you afterward. Let's see, what else do we have? I think it's time for like announcements. So I'm going to do something a little different today and actually go up to the podium. So I would like it very much if my esteemed colleague Garth Redfield would join me at the podium. And I assume this is on. Many of us have been working with Garth for quite a number of years, and he's certainly been here at the district for way longer than me. I wanted to recognize Garth today because next week he is going to be retiring after 28 years of service. And from my perspective, at a minimum, he has spent most of that 28 years with us. And in relation to the consent decree, the settlement agreement, all the discussions we've had, and he's been a huge proponent of sound science, which I think we're all very grateful for. His heart and soul has been with us in trying to help get Everglades restoration done, if it's ever done. and move projects along and helping us all work together in a really collaborative manner. So in recognition of your effort here, specifically related to the refuge in the park, we have a little gift for you. I don't really know what Garth is going to be doing when he retires.
Neither does Garth.
I've heard he might take up bicycling again. I'm pretty sure there's like, you know, the honey-do list and all the stuff around the house and a whole lot of other fun activities. So Garth, you need to stay well hydrated. So we have here a water bottle from Everglades National Park. It shows some folks riding their bicycles. And another water bottle here from the Loxahatchee National Wildlife Refuge to recognize and thank you for all the time you've spent with us here. So thanks a lot, Garth.
Thank you, darling. Thank you all. It's gone by amazingly fast. You know, this week I've been kind of looking over, cleaning out all my files and everything, so it's memory lane of all the things that we've been involved with. Some of them have been a little bit tough and contentious, but at the end of the day, this agency and this process is truly unique, and it's exemplary. So even though it's not easy, it still is the way things need to get done. People need to talk, and we need to work stuff out, and everything needs to be transparent, and this process meets those criteria, as do a number of others that we're involved with. So it's been an interesting time. I cannot believe that it was 40 years ago that I got my degree. I just cannot believe it. But I was joking with Stuart earlier that I saw my dissertation. I still have it. And it's just like a tablet off a mountain or something. You look at it, and it was hand-typed by. Can you imagine that? I didn't even have it on a word processor. It was really scary. Anyway, thank you all very much, and I appreciate the gestures. These are perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. For the reps, if we have action items out of this meeting, we'll either address them at the end of the meeting, or you guys can email us or let us know about things for future meetings. I'm assuming somebody will wave if you can't hear me. Okay. Nobody's waving, so I don't know what that means. Do we have any requests to modify the agenda for today? I kind of have one. John and I talked about this. If you guys don't mind, we'd like to reverse the second and third agenda items so that John would give the water year compliance report first, and then the fourth quarter settlement agreement report. And part of the reason for that is we don't want you guys to have to hear him say the same thing twice. So are you guys all right with that?
I think it makes perfect sense.
Thanks, Donato. Everybody okay? Okay, I'm seeing head nods here. Okay, John, you got it. All right, great. Also, for everybody on the phone, there's a huge litany of items that are posted on the website. First of all, for today's meeting, we do have the agenda, the settlement agreement report documents. We've also got the quality assessment report, and the associated water quality data for the fourth quarter is out there. There's a suite of data tables that we've been putting out. Those are there for today's meeting, as well as both of John's presentations and the draft meeting notes. And there's a one-page handout for agenda item number 4, which has to do with meeting frequencies and schedules. But besides all of that, we've not met since October, and we did have a meeting scheduled that we canceled, and it didn't get rescheduled. So quarterly materials that we would have put out for the previous quarter that we didn't even schedule a meeting for, those were also put out on the webpage. And I believe we notified the reps, as well as we have a TOC interested parties email list that we use. So we notified everybody that those were posted out there. So those would have been presented if we'd have had a quarterly meeting in March or April. So just want to make sure you guys all know those are out there. Okay, and I think we can move on to the next item, and that's to approve the meeting summary from our October meeting. We have any comments? I would entertain a motion maybe to approve these meeting notes.
Hey, Julie, this is Frank. I have no comments.
Okay, thank you, Frank.
Yeah, this is Dan with the Core. I concur with the meeting notes.
Okay,
This is Lori. I concur.
okay,
Donato concurs.
great, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. All right. Next, now I'm going to get confused. We have John Madden, and he's going to present the Water Year 2018 Annual Shark River Slough Compliance.
Good morning, all. Can everyone on the phone hear me okay? Or someone?
Yep.
Great. Working with
Yes.
the microphones here. Good. Yeah, I think it makes a lot more sense to go through our Water Year 18 final data first, and then my following presentation will add the next 3 months. So I'm here first presenting the update to the Shark River Slough compliance that was finalized based on receiving the USGS data at the S12 structures. So first we start with the summary that's in the report that has been posted. The top section, which is for the refuge, was posted in January, and just briefly, I'll cover the more recent data, but all high level, all 3 months, July, August, September, the geometric mean was lower than the long-term level. And the very bottom portion, well, I'll go to the middle, the Shark River Slough we're reporting on now, which I'll go into more detail. We're reporting 12-month periods ending July, August, and September 2018. And those 12-month flow mean concentrations for both method 1 and method 2 were below the long-term limit. And then for Everglades National Park, the limit is fixed and not based on any flow, but the values, the flow volumes computed for methods 1, 2, and 3 are shown, and the concentrations for all methods for the 12-month periods ending July, August, and September 2018, all were below the 11 parts per billion, and right around the 6 parts per billion on average for all those different methods and periods. So the purpose of this presentation is really to finalize the Shark River Slough results for, on the bottom row of this table, you can see October 2017 through September 2018, which is the water year, federal water year 2018. We had a significant amount of flow, over 1.7 million acre feet, which put our long-term limit at 7.6. The method 1 is the historic method of computing with the total of the S12s, 333, and 355 A and B structures, less, well, the total volume includes all that flow, and then for flow rate mean concentrations, we subtract out 334. Method 2 is same, except it incorporates all of the 356 inflows, the pumps from the east, regardless of the source. So the flow rate mean concentrations for both methods resulted in 7.3 and being lower the long-term limit, and the observed percent of sampling events, the biweekly events, was 30.8% greater than 10 parts per billion, which is lower than the computed guideline of 40.1%. The following slide shows annual data all the way back to 1991. And as of 2007, the long-term limit was in effect. And we know that water year 18, as I showed on the previous slide, is on the rightmost bar. The concentrations that were measured, the flowway mean concentrations, are shown with the blue bars, and then the limit, long-term limit each year, is the red, solid red line. And we're, again, the flowway mean of 7.3 was below the long-term limit of 7.6. The long-term goal for flows entering Shark River Slough was stated in the consent decree as 8 parts per billion. And despite the 2 exceedances in the last 5-year period for water year 14 and water year 2017, the 5-year flow weighted mean is 8.2 parts per billion. The average of the annual flow weighted means is 8.5 parts per billion, and our annual average of the limits is 8.9 parts per billion. So we're approaching or at the 8 parts per billion level. And we can see, I'll go in a little detail first on the flows and then the concentrations that were associated with those. See if I can bring up a pointer here. So this shows the last 36 months, and right now I'm reporting on the last 12 months, which is approximately, at this point I'm moving the cursor now. Prior to that, going into, at the wet season water year 17, we saw a lot of rain in June, which drove the flows higher. We can see kind of the offset of when the S12B, A and B structures open here on the bottom. This is stacked flow for the lightest blue is S12A going all the way through S12D and 333. We can see some S356 in yellow and the 355 A and B flows in green. So that flow increased, and then again in September with Hurricane Irma, we saw a significant increase in flows from all the main structures. Then we entered into, that's the point we entered into water year 18. And by the time we got to mid-March, the only structure left flowing was 333, and from mid-March through mid-May, basically all that flow ended up going around the corner to 334. And then we again got significant rainfall in mid-March, which triggered opening of 333, S12D, and S12C. This just shows a little more detailed the pattern of each individual structure. It wasn't clear on the previous chart. Just to accommodate some of the flows, the axes are a little bit different. We go up to 1800 CFS on the top 3, and S12D we're going up to 2400. 333 flows a little more consistently throughout the year. And you can see the pattern at 356. We did have pumping. I guess I can quickly go back and give you a little more information. For the S12s, for the water year totals, the flow is approximately 1.28 million acre feet. And A and B here shown on top totaled about 350,000 acre feet. And then S12C and D were about 932,000 acre feet. And then looking at these, the total for 333 for the water year 18 was 440,000 acre feet, and 356, 29,000 acre feet, and the 355B, where we had some temporary pumps from August through mid-September, pumped 11,000 acre feet in this period shown here. And then we have a chart that shows those areas that go into the L29 East, and this is where I explained that most of the 333 flow was actually going through 334. So 333 daily flows are shown in the dark blue, and the 334 is laid on top. So any of those flows under that orange line are not going into Shark River Slough, although they are counted in the long-term limit calculation. And then from mid-March through the end of the year, the water year, 334 really was not flowing. So all these flows from 333, 356, and the 355A, or temporary pumps at 355B, were all flowing into Shark River Slough. So here we start to add some information on the stages and the concentrations to that. So the total flow into Shark River Slough, and also passing 334, I guess. This is the total flow used for the limit. We saw the stages increase significantly prior to the beginning of the water year, and that's represented by the 3-gauge average in the blue line, and then we have 333 headwater in the red line. Just wanted to give a little more information on how those stages were aligned with the flows and the concentration. So as the flows decreased and less water in the system, we could see at the beginning of the water year, concentrations were very, very low, and that drove a lot of the annual flow-weighted mean at the beginning of the year. And as the stages dropped, again, when these concentrations started creeping up here, the stages were getting down to about 9 feet NGVD, but most of this flow, or all of this flow in this period, March to mid-May, was not going into Shark River Slough. This was being conveyed down to South Dade. Then we had the May event, and concentrations did go up. This shows every weekly concentration. So not every one of these points was used in the compliance calculation, but this highest point here with the flow on, that was May 29th, and it was about 29 parts per billion. That was a compliance biweekly sampling event that went into the annual flow-weighted mean. And then the following week, and so as part of that 29 parts per billion across the entire system, we saw 53 parts per billion at S333. And all that information is on the data sheets that's posted to the web and in your handouts if you're here. The following week, 333 concentrations came down to 46 parts per billion, making the overall event concentration 23, 24. And then the week following that, we were at a 16 parts per billion at 333 and 12.7 parts per billion, finished out the year at low phosphorus levels. So this next chart we typically show, this is the biweekly sampling events, the ones that go into the compliance calculation for the year. And again, we see the rise and fall of phosphorus here in again, this is the May 29th event. We're at about 29 parts per billion. And then the very next, we're at 12 or 13 parts per billion. And the lack of flow here shows that water was going around the corner in that period. And I think my final slide here shows the 12-month rolling in these blue diamonds, along with the same individual event sampling. So this very last point here shows where we were for the 12-month period ending September 2018, which was the 7.3 parts per billion. Thank you. Are there any questions on this water year 18 results?
I don't. This is Donato. I do not have questions on the results, but I do like your figure that's on page 9. And I'm wondering what we have to do to get that into the regular report. And then on that regular settlement agreement quarterly report, is it possible to give us provisional data as well? Like, we already know that we saw a huge spike a couple of weeks ago. Would that be something that we could consider incorporating in the regular meeting, since we're going to be focusing on this structure heavily for the next few years? I hate to ask for more work, but
I'm wondering if maybe we could defer at least part of your question to agenda item 4, where we're talking about meeting schedules and data reporting. Would that be okay? But I will share that John and I have talked about getting this into the report, so, because it is kind of meaningful.
Yeah, I'll look for direction from the TOC representatives. Right, there is nowhere in the report currently where stages are shown. So that, and I think Julie's suggestion to defer part of the conversation to agenda item 4 is appropriate, since I think we'll be discussing, you know, in absence of a meeting, what materials would be posted, or even with the meeting, what should be included in the report. So we have that available. The provisional data aspect is, I guess we'll have to, we've looked at in the past, there's a little more complicated calculation when you're incorporating flow, and the flow data has to be processed and the water quality data. So, you know, typically for the refuge, we give you right up till almost a month before. And I know we've had this conversation before. I just want to make sure that we don't provide false information or something that's not ready to be presented. So having that turnaround, you know, in addition to the workload, there's a risk there of presenting provisional data that's going to change people's perception on things.
And I do think we do put some provisional data on the data tables, but we can talk about that. Because I know, and I don't remember when this agreement was made, but we had agreed that because the Shark River Slough data isn't actually final until toward the end of March, that we had discontinued putting provisional data in the actual report itself. But we can discuss that again in a few minutes, if that's okay. Thanks. Anything else for John on the annual Shark River Slough report? Okay, we always get nervous when there's a lot of water going through there, so I'm glad we managed success here. Okay, next is the fourth quarter settlement agreement report, which will include both the refuge and some Shark River Slough data.
Very good. So the previous report I presented on went through September of 2018, and here we're looking at, we're going to be looking at all three areas in a little more detail: the refuge, Shark River Slough, and Taylor Slough. And again, we do have provisional information in here that is summarized on the following table. The provisional information is in the middle for Shark River Slough. So this period, because we're a little behind on having this meeting, goes through December 2018. So we're reporting on those 3 months, October, November, and December 2018. And again, the documents associated with this reporting have all been posted. And as Julie mentioned, in addition, in January, the time frame where we canceled the previous meeting, the previous set of documents was available. So if you have specific questions on any of the last 2 quarters, I'd be happy to answer. But I'm going to cover here the refuge at the top of this table continued to perform well in its geometric mean TP concentrations, October, November, December, all below the long-term level. And as stages started to decline there in going into the dry season. So Shark River Slough, because as I had emphasized in the previous water year presentation, the beginning of water year 18 in back in October, November of water year of calendar year 2017 had very high flows and very low concentrations. So those, as we're stepping through these months, those periods are dropping off our 12-month rolling. So we actually see higher TP flow aid mean concentrations than the limit. It's not an unusual pattern. This is in the past, usually this time of year, we see this, and then hopefully we catch up as stages increase and we get more flow towards the end of the wet season. So for these periods, the two methods were a little different, since we did have flow through S356, which is shown as part of the method 2 in parentheses. So we have 7.8, 7.7 versus 7.6, and then the flow aid means go up to as high as 9.1 versus a TP limit of 8.4. Down in Taylor Slough, as I mentioned before, we have a fixed limit of 11, and we're staying right around our level of 6 parts per billion on average in that area with the 3 methods. So first, I'll go into a little more detail on the refuge, showing the past 36 months ending December 2018. The blue dots represent our monthly geometric means for the sampling event that occurs each month, and the associated stage is shaded in the background as these bars. That's the average of the 3 gauges used to determine the stage, and the long-term level, which is inverse to that stage, is shown with the red line. And we can see all except for 1 point in the last 36 months have been below, with the average of those 36 months being 6.7 parts per billion, which is below the long-term average stated in the consent decree, long-term goal for those 14 stations. And this following chart shows the same information, just all relative to the limit. So if the limit, or this 0 line, we can see how far above or below. And on average, we're 2.9 parts per billion below the long-term level over this 36-month period, with the sole excursion being 0.4 parts per billion above the long-term level. So I kind of stepped through this October, November, December data on the next table already in the summary. As we moved on to January, February, March, and April, we had quite a variety of results, but all of the geomeans are at or below the long-term levels. We had, the first month was over 5 parts per billion below, but then in February we had 9.1 parts per billion for both the geomean and the long-term level computed. In between this period, at January 23rd, we had a stage of 16.01 as a 3 gauge average, and then it hopped up to this 16.62 on the sampling day, which was on February 5th. So less than 2 weeks later, we had about a 0.6 foot rise. It seems like that had some effect on the measured concentrations, but it quickly dropped back down to 6.3 for March, almost 3 parts per billion below, and then more than 3 parts per billion below for April. So all these months met the requirement of being below the long-term level. So with that, I'll move on to Shark River Slough and look at November, December, January. Talked about these numbers on the summary slide, and we discussed the methods in the previous presentation. I can highlight, this is the same slide we talked about before with our 5-year average now at 8.2 parts per billion for Shark River Slough, the flow aid mean, sorry, yeah, flow aid mean for that period, and the average of the last 5 years was 8.5 parts per billion. Again, I had discussed the water year 18, but we've added these last 3 months, and we did see the flow drop off quite a bit during this period. So again, as we're stepping these 12-month periods, this October, November, and December flow kind of all go off the table, and we're just looking at the most recent 12 months. So that's the change we're seeing. Again, the pattern of S12 is fairly typical. 333, we're just adding these last months. This flow here we'll see on the following slide in November and December all went through 334, other than a minor part, and flows at 356, and the temporary pumps at 355B were secured, so those no flow in November, December period. Like I said, here we saw flow through 333, but all going around the corner of South Dade, November and December. And as far as our biweekly sampling events, we can see the flow with the blue bars and the concentrations, the yellow circles. Not too much after that one period here in May and June that we had discussed. Flows are dropping off, so these aren't going to be part of the flow aid mean for the year. And here's our endpoint, the 12-month rolling and the individual sampling events. So we're at 8.4 here with method 1 at the end of this 12-month period. So with that, I'll move on to Taylor Slough Coastal Basins. In this table, we're looking at the original method 1 on the left, 6.2, 6.2, and 6.3 for the 12-month periods ending November, December, January, which should be October, November, December, so we might have to amend that table. Let me look back quick and see if those numbers are saying 319. I think it's just a label that's changed. I think the numbers are correct for the, oh no, that's right, October, November, December. I'm sorry, my bad. Those are correct. So method 1 is 332 plus 18C, 332D plus 18C, and then adding in G737 would be method 2, which is a separate conveyance route to Taylor Slough. And then method 3 adjusts the flow weighted mean portion that goes into the 332 detention area by accounting for the concentrations at 328. But they're all very similar. We do see lower concentrations at G737, which makes the method 2 a little bit lower. And then again at 328, it appears during this period we see lower concentration than at 332D. Therefore, those concentrations are a little bit lower. Oops. Long-term results for water, the end of each water year compared to the 11 part per billion limit. Our goal in this area under the consent decree is 6 parts per billion, and we're right around there at, the 5-year average is 5.2, and this water year, we're up closer to 6. So we can see over the last 36-month period, the flows, we added in G737 about June, July of 2017. That's the yellow additional flows that you see. Those were all presented, computed based on the S200 pump. So as we moved into this period, we can see all these flows during this period were the S200 pump, and then as of October, there were a couple days in September that the data was available, but we cut it off right at the water year. So October 1st, the start of water year 19, we're using computed flow at G737, which appears to be less than what was being pumped at S200. So we can see the daily flows at S18C, the scale is much larger at 2,500 CFS. And then G737, 332D, S328, which is downstream of 332D, and the 332DX1, which is also downstream of 332D, but does not flow, not considered to flow to Taylor Slough, flows north to the detention area to the north. So this is our summary of those flows that do go into the 332D detention area. These are not stacked, they're in front of each other here. So you can see the portion of 332D inflows here, which then were measured to pass through at S328, shown in green, or in the past here back February and March of 2018 that went through DX1 to the north. So in the fourth quarter, we had, well, I guess on the previous slide, 2,700 acre feet for G737. And we're looking at 328 has about 16,000 acre feet shown in these last 3 months. So we have weekly events or more in the past that represent the compliance sampling for Taylor Slough and coastal basins. We had one concentration that was 15 parts per billion associated with a September 4th event, but the events prior to and after that were at 4 parts per billion. It was S18C was the difference there. S18C had a concentration of 17 parts per billion that was measured, and that was the majority of the flow for that sampling event. And finally, last slide, the 12-month rolling average 12-month flow weighted means for Taylor Slough. The endpoint here is, for the most recent 12 months, is 6.3 parts per billion. Any questions on the quarterly update?
John, thank you. That was a really nice presentation, both of them. Can you go back 2 slides? So on this slide, this is method 1, but we don't really get to see the influence of the 328 or the G737. Is this something we can think about figuring out how to incorporate for this imagery?
Sure. Do you have any ideas? On the data sheets, we have a single data sheet for each method. So we have 3 data sheets. What specifically might you want to see?
Visualization of it. So we can talk about it more in depth offline, but I do want to see if we can have a discussion about it. Maybe error bars to represent the other concentrations in it. I haven't I have a couple images that I produced of it myself, but I don't have them here, so we could talk about it offline.
Okay.
Other questions, comments for John? Okay, thanks, John. All right, let's see. Our next agenda item says future TOC meetings and data reporting. And I know Donato is already starting to look at that. First of all, I want to point out it's been almost 8 months since we last met. After all has been said and done. I've had a couple of different discussions with my principal, Drew, and he's asked that we bring forward a proposal to kind of adjust how we do schedules and reporting. You should have a handout. I'm going to hold mine up, but I've scribbled all over mine, so please forgive me. But there's a handout on this. What we're proposing here is the idea that this technical oversight committee would always meet once a year, preferably in the May timeframe. And we would be going over the kind of material we went over today. In other words, the final Shark River Slough data and any other data updates, as well as any other topics or agenda items that we've agreed we need to discuss. We would also then, instead of reserving this auditorium for 2 days every month forever, we would reserve additional quarterly meeting dates, but perhaps only hold those quarterly meetings if there's a reason for us to meet, something that we actually need to do or take action, or potentially our principals asking us to meet to review data or any kind of actions or decisions we need to make. So that's the concept there. The rest of it has to do with the data updates. As you have all experienced, pretty much any time since I can remember that we've canceled or not held meetings, we still put data out on the webpage every quarter. We would propose to continue putting data tables on pretty much the same quarterly schedule that we already have, only potentially without the meetings. And then I don't see it on our handout, but you may or may not be aware that we do an awful lot of reporting on the various permits that are issued by DEP to us. And those show up in the South Florida Environmental Report every year. But I just want to mention every one of those is an annual report. So this gets to Donato's earlier question as well. We're actually proposing that the report with all the text and everything in it also only be done annually, because it seems like the really valuable information is encompassed in the data tables up front. And again, we would post those reports, like the annual report would be posted for the annual meeting. We've also spoken with the folks over in Analytical Services. They would continue to do a quarterly QA report with the Excel spreadsheet data dump that they've been doing. So the data materials would continue to be posted on the web quarterly. I would be asking Violetta in this case to notify the representatives as well as our email list, TOC interested parties, that these items have been posted. So that's kind of what we're looking at doing here, if that seems suitable for you guys, because I hate dragging everybody here when we're presenting data and then we don't have decisions and things that we actually need to accomplish. I think we've all been working together quite a bit outside of this body on projects and moving Everglades restoration forward. And so, we're still splitting our time up between showing up here and getting other work done. So I realize we didn't get this proposal out till last week. Don't know if any of you have had a chance to discuss it with your principals or coworkers, but that's our ask of the group here, if that would be acceptable.
This is Donato. I'm actually I'm not speaking for my principals because I have not spoken to them about this topic yet. As you just pointed out, it just came up.
Can you speak up, please?
This is Donato. I have not had the opportunity to speak to my principals on this topic, so I am speaking for myself. When I think about reducing the frequency, I am pretty much of the opposite opinion considering what's going on right now. We have major modifications happening to the system throughout. We have STA1 West being expanded right now. It should be being flooded. We should start seeing information coming out of restoration strategies. We got new sources of water coming to the system at higher volumes than we ever modeled before. STA water coming down from the lake. So it's a lot of things. We got combined operations plan happening down in Everglades National Park. We're starting to see creeping up concentrations happening in Taylor Slough with these new structures added that John just pointed out. So I think that we actually have more work to be doing, and we need to be sitting here and discussing some of these topics more frequently than less frequently. We have FEBs online. We got the EAA reservoir coming online. So there are a lot of modifications that are happening to the system that I think need to actually be addressed and discussed here. Like right now, I don't really understand what the influence of Lake Okeechobee water is on the STAs, but I do see the STAs are not performing at the level that they have been performing prior. I think that's something that needs to be discussed here, particularly because we used to get that type of information from the long-term plan meetings, which were on a quarterly basis, but have been reduced to annual frequency. Also, we point to the SFERs, which are on an annual basis, and this proposal to reduce these quarterly reports to an annual basis also concerns me because I use these reports to help to verify some of the data analysis that I'm doing, and if I have to wait for a whole year to do that or call John every time I want to do that, that makes it a little more challenging for me. It's 4 meetings a year. We've already, like I said, we reduced the long-term plan meeting, which is the other place we used to get substantial information. We don't talk about source controls, and we're heavily relying on restoration strategies. This additional source control that's supposed to be coming out of restoration strategies, this expansion of STAs, to justify why we're not pursuing more remedies for every time we have a violation. So I'm personally, I am not I'm not in support of reducing the frequency of these meetings right now. And I look out here in the audience right now, and the last time we had a meeting, Drew said he forgot. He came up at the last minute after the meeting was completely over. Drew Martin, a public member, came up. It was 12 o'clock, I was walking out, and he said, oh, I forgot, because you guys keep changing the frequency of the meeting. So for all of these reasons, I'm not in support, but I will still go communicate with my principals to see what their positions are.
Okay, that would be great, thank you. I have some responses for you, but I kind of want to hear from the other folks first.
Yeah, Julie,
Julie, this is Bill Walker. I think Donato might have said this, but I couldn't quite hear everything. So is the proposal then to report the data, but the data does not include like the kind of information that John just showed us in terms of the results for the last 3 months in terms of the actual compliance calculations?
I believe the data tables that we're currently putting out on the webpage contain all of that information, and those would continue, which was something I was going to mention in response to Donato's comments.
Okay.
I don't think you guys should have to wait for us to put a full text report together to look at data. The data is always available.
Right, as long as the table shows, the limit and the flow-weighted means and so forth and the refuge results without the report, as long as we get the table, because I also use that kind of information to check my calculations. So, and also it just seems like really good information to have, so we don't have to wait for the end of the year to figure out what the compliance situation is.
No, we don't want to hold you guys up on data. What about
What-
the reps
what-
here? Do you guys have,
Let me add one more. So the other report that it sounds like might be disappearing, and I might be wrong, is the QA report.
no, that's staying as is.
That'll be quarterly?
Yes,
continued?
totally, still on its same schedule. Dan, you were getting ready to speak?
Yes, thank you, Julie. Dan Crawford, Core TOC rep. I do want to just put it on the record that the decision to cancel the January TOC meeting, despite the government furlough, was not a decision that was made unilaterally across the TOC. It was a decision that was made solely by the Water Management District. And similarly, the decision to delay the scheduling of what is today's meeting, which is the April TOC meeting, was also made based on Water Management District's staff availability and the restructuring of the governing board and the establishment of Drew as the new ED. So I want that to be important on the record that certainly the Core made ourselves available for the January TOC meeting, even though Donato was furloughed at that particular time. I want to reemphasize Donato's point that I think there's a lot of really key discussions that are happening currently. As Donato indicated, the COP project is fixing to alter the timing and distribution and volumes of flows into Shark River Slough. That plan is nearing having a preliminary recommended plan within the next month. It's certainly information that is timely to be bringing. The Corps presented the COP to the TOC back in October, actually the last time we had this meeting. And had we been given more effective lead time for scheduling this meeting, and had it been scheduled on a routine schedule, I think we would have brought back COP to provide an update to the TOC, and certainly we're committed to doing that at the following meeting. But COP is supposed to have a new plan operational by June or July of 2020, with the preliminary indications of a increased federal budget for Everglades restoration program next year. We're looking to aggressively move forward with construction contracts for the Central Everglades Planning Project, which the Corps has also used this TOC forum to present to in the past about the progress of Central Everglades. So I think as that project starts moving into developing its operational manual, I think the insights and the public discussion from this forum are also important to that. So we potentially would have Central Everglades southern infrastructure in place as early as 2022. And of course, although the state's been working on the post-authorization change report for Central Everglades for 1.5 years, that also has not been brought previously to this forum. The post-authorization change report for the new EAA deep storage reservoir and the new STA in the EAA was authorized shortly after we had our last TOC meeting back in October. So that's also very important new information that I think as we discuss upcoming meeting opportunities needs to be brought to this forum for discussion and situational awareness. I think it's, as Donato indicated, it's a really good opportunity to make sure that the public and agencies and stakeholders that are tuned into water quality, which is really instrumental to our overall implementation of Everglades restoration, this is a really good forum to provide dialogue and ensure visibility of our actions. So I will emphasize again, as Donato said, I haven't had a chance to formally speak to my principal, so I do again speak on behalf of myself, but I will pass this proposal along and certainly make a commitment to bring it back at the earliest opportunity.
That's great, thank you. Lori?
Yeah, this is Lori with the Loxahatchee National Wildlife Refuge. And without repeating what you've heard from Donato and Dan, with the changes that are happening north of the refuge is really at the front door of a lot of the water quality issues. And I would like to be able to say, hey, let's just meet once a year. And I did like to hear that the quarterly meetings would still be on the calendar. I just think technically that I would still be a little uncomfortable not having, and like Donato said, it's 4 meetings a year. And I think it would help us do a little more adaptive management if we're still meeting on a regular basis and looking at the data. And, And I really want to emphasize, I think it's really important for us to be looking at the provisional data, and you guys are more than welcome to put your disclaimer at the bottom so that everybody understands, and I think everybody understands provisional data. But I think for it to be useful and for us to be able to kind of see the problems happening as they're happening and have these conversations, I think it would be really important to have, you know, the latest and greatest data that we can get our hands on. Plus, there's this emphasis of moving water south, and we don't yet know what effects it's having on the STAs and what they're going to look like in another year or two in the future. And we also have some hot spots, even like in the EAA, what do we call it? Source locations that we still need to kind of handle that could influence water quality at the refuge. So I think, you know, with the governor's emphasis and even the governing board, from what I've heard, the emphasis on water quality and, you know, the importance that we're really looking at right now, I think we would be going in the opposite direction on not meeting 4 times a year.
Can I
Okay,
add one
thank
more
you.
point?
What about,
Can I add one more point?
you're not going to let Frank take a turn? No, I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Go, Frank, my
That's
bad.
okay, Donato, go ahead. You ready, Frank? Do you have any comments?
Yeah, thank you, Julie. And, I hear what Dan and, Lori and Donato are saying, and I appreciate that holistically. I too, I'm just looking at this. I looked at this last week, this proposal, and then I'm reevaluating again early this week. Julie, I have not had an opportunity to sit down with our principal here at the department and talk with them about what this means holistically, and it's very good to hear the input from the other, representatives here at TOC. So this is very good to take back and have this feedback to the principal. And I recognize, obviously at the department we facilitate a lot of these authorizations, facilitate a lot of the discussions and meetings associated with changes. Changes are positive. We're having a lot of changes in Everglades, and we have our priority projects, and some of these priorities of what Donato mentioned with restoration strategies. Lori and Dan mentioned the reservoir. We're excited to see these changes. We're going to have a great opportunity in the near future. We're kind of targeting 2022 as a very big year for Everglades, I believe, both for our storage, Lake Okeechobee changing, COP being in place, restoration strategies probably running pretty good at that point in time. So there's going to be a lot of changes in the near future. So that being said, I'll just leave it at that. And I will tell you, Julie, I have not had an opportunity. I'll repeat myself again. I have not had an opportunity to sit down with our principal here at the department and have this discussion. So until then, I can't speak on what the department would like to do. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Frank. Donato, you have a additional comment?
So my last comment is about the provisional approach that we're doing for the compliance evaluation. So we still are reporting multiple methods of compliance right now, and we haven't even discussed going back to Appendix A to finalize either of those right now. And I don't know where that comes in based on the way we've been managing these meetings. Historically, we would have had one of these quarterly meetings, discussed it, kicked it over to Appendix A sub-team, and we would have worked it out. But I don't know now. What are we doing?
Okay, well, I appreciate all your feedback. I would hope each of us would go back to our principals and have a discussion about this. Since you guys all gave your personal opinions, I'm going to give you mine. I hear some concerns about data availability, and I really want to reassure you that data will be no less available in the future, whether we meet or not. The data is still available to you guys. I am still confused, I will say, because I'm not an attorney, but I am a little confused about how restoration strategies relates to the Technical Oversight Committee. I know we have indicated in the past when there's been an excursion or something that we felt those projects would help us, but I'm not seeing where restoration strategies fits into this consent decree and the Technical Oversight Committee. That's just kind of where I'm at. Situational awareness, I can really appreciate all of us having situational awareness, and I think with us continuing to provide data updates that we would have that situational awareness. And I too am maybe a little frustrated that the Appendix A subteam hasn't landed anywhere. I am not going to fib to anybody. It's extra work for my staff to have to constantly compute and recompute numbers. Yet historically, it has taken the TOC sometimes a couple of years of actively meeting on a monthly basis to even conclude what data to use or not use. And this was back when the C-111, I think, got kicked off. So I think you guys are bringing up good points. I really appreciate them. I just personally think there are some other forums in which all of this discussion also takes place. And I'm just wondering if it's not something specific that the TOC needs to do or that we are charged with doing, maybe this isn't really the right place to have those discussions. We've been asked numerous times in recent years to bring restoration strategies here, but some of the specific items you guys are mentioning, I'm not sure this group here has a say-so. And I would hope we could find some other ways for us to have those conversations. I know I'm a little bit limited because we treat this as a sunshine body in the state of Florida, so I'm a little bit limited in having individual discussions with you folks, but I think on many of these efforts, we're already having discussions among the agencies and working collaboratively to move them forward. So I would ask, please do talk with your principals. We'll do our best to get your notes captured as quickly as we can here. And just, I'd like this to be a fruitful avenue for getting work done, more so than showing up and talking about data and not making decisions. And we're really not a decision-making group to start with, but just my thoughts in response to your comments. So I wasn't necessarily expecting us to vote and agree today. I was, that would be a happy accident, but if folks could chat with their principals and get back to us, that would be very helpful.
Hey, Julie,
This is John Barquette. I just want to make one observation that listening to the very healthy discussion, that there is, I think, a huge public interest in what goes on at the TOC meetings. And so even if it's just a meeting where there's a discussion of data, no decisions are made, there's still value that I think needs to be considered in terms of the public's interest in attending and listening and perhaps reacting. You can't know from meeting to meeting whether there will be a reaction. So data availability for the scientists is great, but data presentation for folks that aren't scientists also has a lot of value. And so while I appreciate the fact that this meeting may only take an hour and we'll be done and we'll move on, it's still, I think, in terms of the public's perception of the process and of the TOC, of the Water Management District, of Everglades Restoration, is a benefit that ought to be weighed, excuse me, in an evaluation of whether to cut back on meetings or not. So keep that in mind as you're having discussions with your principals.
Thank you, Mr. Barquette. I hear you loud and clear as I look at our very empty auditorium here. So that's just a little bit of a response there. But yes, I do understand this is a forum folks are expecting. So.
Hey, Julie, so this is Lori again. Could you clarify again, you said something that we didn't have any input on, what was it, restoration strategies? Is that what?
Well, restoration strategies falls under a series of consent orders and a totally separate judge's decision. Right. And while we do have stormwater treatment areas in the consent decree, the engineer in me is reading really black and white. We've done that already. But our group here isn't charged with responsibility over restoration strategies. We're charged with responsibility over the park and the refuge and ensuring that those are being restored and that the water quality in those two areas is good. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. Yes, I realize the long-term plan meetings also used to be held more frequently, but it seems that those are the meetings where they talk about things like the impact of the Lake Okeechobee water that's going through the STAs and the FEBs and the EAA reservoir, and all those other items that you guys have brought up are typically, at least in my mind, discussed at those meetings.
Okay, I just was looking for some clarification on what you
okay.
meant by that. Because I know in my water quality world, and when we start talking about issues, what I typically hear is, once we're done with restoration strategies, things should be better. And I'm really paraphrasing.
Yeah.
So making it really simple. So anyway, so that's what I keep hearing when we start talking about specific issues with consent decree type of stuff. I hear, just let us get restoration strategies done. And so I guess maybe that's where sometimes maybe the line blurs a little bit. But anyway, in discussions. But I think what I'm hearing is that, you know, restoration now is taking off. We're about to hit lightning speed. We're not slowing down. And I can see if we were slowing down, yeah, we'd probably want to slow down our meetings. But I think the gun's been shot and the bullet's going, and I think now would just be the wrong time. And that's me personally.
Okay. Well, as I said, let's, if we would all get back to our principals and get some additional feedback, hopefully we can get a yay or nay out of this. Not that I expected that to happen today. Anything else you guys want to bring up about the meetings and the reporting? Okay. All right, so that's our last agenda item. I would ask if we have any public comments on the meeting, anything we discussed. I guess Bill's was kind of a public comment. But I appreciate you clarifying, Bill, on the data. Anything else anybody has? All right, I think the only action item we came up with was we're going to talk to our principals again about meeting frequency and content of reports. Again, we would still put out data. It's just the actual textual report we're looking at trying to move to annually. I don't know what you guys want to do about scheduling a next meeting. That is something we normally do at this time. This meeting is a quarterly meeting that would have been held in approximately May, which of course took us till now to get it together. So a next quarterly meeting, we've got a couple of reservations on the calendar. We could say tentatively we would like to meet after we hear from our principals, if you guys want to do that. Honestly, in looking at the dates that we've got the auditorium reserved, I think it might be a little silly, maybe, to have a quarterly meeting in a month, but that's out here. We're looking at maybe late October for a next quarterly meeting, and we do have some other dates that the auditorium is reserved for, although I'm not going to be here for one of them. So, comments on next meeting, or do you guys want to talk to your principals and get back to us by email?
Julia, this is Dan Crawford. I would recommend that pending just further discussion with our principals that we continue to hold the auditorium for the meeting dates in July, and then let's all aim to get back to you at the earliest opportunity within the next week or so. That would be my commitment from the Corps.
And I would really need to hear from you in the next week or so, because it's quite an effort for us to put these meetings together, and it takes more than a couple of weeks to get it done. Comments, Lori, Donato, Frank?
Well, I think it's too early to not plan a meeting. If you don't want to do it in a month, maybe we pick one of the other months and then try to get back on schedule. I mean, until the principals say, no, let's don't, meet as frequently, I think we need to continue on with the way we've been doing business.
I concur with both Dan and Lori.
And so are you guys looking at having a quarterly meeting in like August? August and then a quarterly meeting in October? What are we talking about here? I need to get a little feedback.
Dan, didn't you want to do some COP presentation?
Yeah, I do think that there's certainly an opportunity to bring a status update on COP as COP moves in towards its final preliminary recommended plan within the next month. I also think that as the Corps is wrapping ourselves around the level of effort involved with planning, public coordination, and ultimately implementation of the Everglades Agricultural Area Reservoir, I think that's also a federal state action that we certainly would like. You know, the Corps did bring Central Everglades to this forum, even though it touches elements of both consent decree and restoration strategies, consent orders. I think we would look to bring that information to this team as well, kind of in partners with the Water Management District who wrote the original report last May timeframe. I think both of those are items that I'd like the opportunity to further coordinate again with my principal, but I think those are items that certainly within the next 60 days would be ripe for inclusion on the agenda with the TAC. Again, whether that's considered a special meeting where we simply bring those items up versus having all of the quarterly reporting standard work that John and his staff work on. I think that's something that we can discuss further with the principals.
Okay, so I'm not seeing dates I can release. I guess I kind of would like to get a concur, and Frank, I don't know what your schedule looks like. I'm thinking it would be good if we could release the auditorium for the July dates and maybe hold the other dates for right now until we hear back from you guys.
Julie, this is just Frank's opinion here, and I do feel like the July dates are probably a little too close to this current date. It's the 25th of June, so they're a little close, and I would prefer to push it off until, like Dan was saying, if there's a presentation, as I know they're working towards, COP and the development of COP, and we've been participating. The department's been participating in the COP development also. But bring it to this venue would be a nice venue also. So I would prefer the August or September dates over the July dates.
Okay. How about, can I get the head nods here? What I'd like to do is cancel the July. And I'm not going to be here on September 24th, so I'm going to already say, let's not do that one. And maybe we could keep the date in August, the first date in September, and the October dates as available here in the auditorium until we hear back from everyone. And I did want to kind of add in here too, you've mentioned COP a couple of times. That's a great example of if we didn't have an annual meeting scheduled, but our principals wanted us to meet to hear about it, we would accommodate that obviously as part of this proposal. So are you guys all right with that? I got to kind of head now. Or is there some real reason you got to meet in July? Let me put it that way.
I think I'm okay with releasing the 16 July date. This is Dan again from the Corps. I'd like, again, for the opportunity for us to speak with our principals before we release the 30 July date at this time. But again, I think we can make a commitment to get back to you within a week to give you sufficient lead time. I concur with your recommendation, Julie, to continue to hold the August, September, and October meeting dates kind of in reserve as opportunities for special meetings. 'Cause I think my concern would be, I think the original quarterly scheduled, the kind of January, April, July, December, July, October timeframe was set for a reason. It syncs up with the annual and the quarterly reporting data availability. So I could see that there's value added to getting back on kind of the quarterly schedule come October. But I think there's Dan's opinion, I believe there's too many moving pieces right now for us to sit here and wait from June all the way till October. And I don't think it's appropriate for the TOC to, for lack of a better word, pay a penalty for the fact that it took 2 months to get this meeting on the calendar, even though it was originally scheduled for April 16th or April 30th, if I'm going back to the agenda in October. So I think we should as the TOC reps adjust to the state's rescheduling of these meetings, I'd like to request that we hold that July 30th date just for another week or so, pending concurrence, and then let's get back from our principals and let's figure out scheduling moving forward. But I would recommend that we go ahead and schedule that October date and go ahead and put it on our calendar, let the public that's in attendance at this meeting know that that meeting is tentatively planned and we have a firm date. And again, if we work through our principles and decide to cancel that, we would jointly send out that announcement at a later date.
Okay. So it sounds like you guys may be okay with us actually releasing the auditorium for the November and December dates too, so we may go ahead and do that at least. Today's Tuesday, the 25th. We have a federal holiday coming up next week. That's on Thursday, the 4th of July. If I could ask you guys to please get back to us. You can email me, Violetta. I think we've got a whole little email chain with all the reps and Mr. Barquette on it. If you guys could please get back to us no later than next Wednesday, the 3rd of July, that would be very helpful. If you are unable to get feedback from your principal by that time frame, if you could also please let us know that, that would also be helpful.
Okay, so I can commit to getting dates from my principals by the 3rd. I don't know that I can commit to getting releasing or changing the timeline that fast.
Well, we'll take one step at a time here.
Let's do that.
Okay, so what I think I heard is we're going to hold on to July 30th, August 27th, September 10th, and October 29th. And then the rest can be released, is it?
That's kind of what I heard.
Until July 3rd.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
You guys all good with that?
I'm good with it.
You all right with that, Frank, Mr. Barquette?
Yes, ma'am, that sounds a good plan. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I'll be willing to work with everyone on scheduling, so.
All right. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Well, no, I like what Dan said, which was to finalize October 29th as a scheduled date.
Yeah, I wrote down to keep that as a tentative quarterly meeting.
Well, he's pushing to have it scheduled now, so we put it on our calendar, not tentatively.
I'm hoping it's already on our calendars, but.
Okay, but is everybody able to attend it? Because normally we check. I'm available.
Dan Crawford, I'm available as well, Donata.
Are we talking about October 29th? I am not, but I can. Don't look at me like that. I just realized I am on travel. But I can have someone sit in for me.
Okay.
Yep. So
All right. So
don't
we'll
hold up
keep.
for me.
I'm sorry? He said he would. Mr. Barquette, are you okay with October 29th?
I am, yes, I am.
Okay, that's what I thought you said earlier. Just wanted to double check. All right. So what I have is we're going to keep July 30th, August 27th, and September 10th on the calendars in case we decide to meet. We are tentatively, potentially having a quarterly meeting on October 29th, and then we'll release the dates that we've got the auditorium reserved in November
Hey,
and December.
Julie, this is Frank. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm looking at our calendars, and it appears on October 29th, there is the South Florida Ecosystem Restoration Task Force meeting in Washington that day. So there may be some individuals not able to attend on behalf of the principals or behalf of the agencies on that day due to their other obligations with that task force meeting, either leading up to it or shortly thereafter also.
Okay, well, we're going to end up with a little bit of a scheduling issue then.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, we will poll you guys as soon as we get clarity on whether or not that meeting is taking place and whether or not our principals want us to meet. We'll have to figure this out because we do run into a number of scheduling difficulties here in the auditorium. We pre-reserve dates as much as possible, and we're constantly being asked to release them, partly because of all the other public outreach that's going on some of these same topics, so.
So should we hold on to November 19th until we hear back about the task force?
Yeah, you guys may want to do that. Is that all right with everybody? So we'll hold November 19th. So we got a couple possible quarterly dates.
And I think if I can just, one other thing, I guess I keep hearing that you feel that some of these topics are also being dealt with in other forums. And that, that may be worth discussion. If there's things that you think are being handled in other areas, I think if we had a discussion on that, because we want to be useful, and we want to make sure that we're not duplicating. So I mean, I'd love to hear more about that at some point, on your thoughts on that.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, we'll do that.
okay.
By the way, this is John Barquette. November 19th, I'm afraid, is not going to work for me. That's the one date that is not good.
All right, I'll tell you guys what we'll do. We'll hear from you by the 3rd of July. We will keep July 30th, August 27th, September 10th. We won't release the other dates for now, except September 24th we're going to release, I'm just saying. And we will look and see what other dates might be available and what would be a normal quarterly timeframe, because it could be something got moved or changed since we put this list together. So we'll have to get back to you guys on that if that's all right. But I hear you loud and clear, so we'll do our best to make things happen until we get additional feedback from our principals. Okay, I'm seeing a bunch of heads nodding here, so okay, great. Any other comments, questions, anything else anybody would like to bring up today? Okay, that'll be it. Thank you very much. Today's meeting of the Technical Oversight Committee is hereby adjourned.
Thank you.